right, Psalm 29. Psalm 29. It's another Psalm of David as we're going through here. As when I was going over this and study, it is one of those Psalms that if you were to start looking to get deeper meanings on stuff, and when I talk about the deeper meanings in this case, I'm talking about people who dig and they're trying and they're trying a little bit too hard. Have you ever been part of a message like that? If you were trying too hard, you could probably get some strange messages out of Psalm 29. But it's just an incredibly easy to understand and a very surface praise to the Lord. This, Psalm 29, all 11 verses, are Hebrew poetry. They're very obviously written in lyrical form in Hebrew, and you can even get an idea, meaning that they're meant to be sung. And you'll get that idea as we're going through, because he uses words that you think, well, why would you use that word exactly? Well, it was the word that rhymed, and it was how it would have worked best in Hebrew. It doesn't translate, it doesn't rhyme in English, but it is for sure a lyrical song. If you wanted to know what somebody's voice sounds like, but you didn't have a recording, what would you do? You want to know what someone's voice sounds like, but you don't have a recording.
Ask them to please sing.
Or say that it's someone who's passed away. You don't have a recording. You could talk to somebody maybe who knew them, right? You could ask somebody to describe. You say, look, for me, my great-grandmother, never knew her. She had passed away long before I was alive, but I could talk to my dad, and I could say, Dad, what did my great-grandmother's voice sound like? And he could try to describe that to me because he heard her talk. He knows the voice of my great-grandmother.
Do you think that you'll ever forget that?
My father? Probably not.
Her voice? Her voice?
I would think not. No, probably not. But you never know. One day we'll get to be with her, and I'll get to hear it again. But we're about to read the description of God's voice by someone who was familiar with it. And that's kind of a neat thing. Because, there are a lot of people who we can hear, because we do have recordings. We have recordings of, Teddy Roosevelt and all of these men who, a little bit further back than we would actually think, we have recordings of their voice. But this psalm is a description of God's voice by somebody who was familiar with hearing it, because David was a man after God's own heart. He was a man who God spoke to on occasion. And so in this instance, he's going to use the phrase, the voice of the Lord, 7 times in just 11 verses. It's going to come up again and again and again and again. In this short psalm, 7 times. Maybe David is writing this as a shepherd. Again, we don't know exactly when, but perhaps he was writing this as a shepherd, watching a storm roll in over the hills. Or perhaps David is writing this as a king from one of his resorts as he watches a storm approach. But he's very definitely talking about a storm, as you'll see in just a moment. We see first the call to worship in verse 1. It says, Give unto the Lord, O ye mighty, give unto the Lord glory and strength. Give unto the Lord the glory due unto his name. Worship the Lord in the beauty of holiness. When he says, O ye mighty, he says, Give unto the Lord, O ye mighty. That could also be translated, sons of God. Now, when the Bible is talking about sons of God, it could mean several things. It could mean, in the New Testament particularly, sons and daughters of God could be you and me. This is the Old Testament, in which case, very typically, when sons of God is used, it's used in reference to the angels, created of God, the holy angels, quite typically, but not always. In this case, certainly, the holy angels. Give unto the Lord, O ye angels, give unto the Lord glory and strength. That's what angels do anyway, right? Angels, they're employed in that on a regular basis. Anyway, this is no break no break with tradition for them. But since God is the ultimate source of glory, and he already has all the strength, what does David mean when he says, give unto the Lord glory and strength? Because you can't give something to someone who already owns all things. In this case, it's to acknowledge, to give by adding, to acknowledge, to attribute. How much glory is due unto the name of God? All of it. And then some, right? You could spend the rest of your life just giving glory to God, and you wouldn't overdo it, right? There's no way that you'll get to heaven and God's going to look at you and say, man, you kind of got carried away. No, the angels, we've read on Sunday evening, the angels, since the time of Isaiah and before that, they're flying around the throne of God saying, holy, 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 and they haven't gotten the job done over the thousands of years. And so this is a call to worship, a recognizing of the authority of God over all the heavenly beings and by all of the heavenly beings. But then the storm rolls in here in verse 3. The authority and the power of God over the forces of nature are about to be showcased, as a man who spent a lot of time outside is going to describe a thunderstorm. Few things reveal the power of God to us more today than nature. When you go outside and you see what happens, this recent storm that we had, where we had the winds and the unreal forces that came down, how hard would you have to work to knock over a grain bin? You'd work for a long time and you'd need machines. But how long did it take God to knock over a grain bin? Not long at all. Or to rip up a tree that took years and years to grow, God's able to snap these things off. Verse 3, the voice of the Lord is upon the waters. So the storm is out at sea. The glory of God thundereth. The Lord is upon many waters. The voice of the Lord is often identified with thunder. If you've been paying attention in Revelation, where every time that the voice of God is heard, even this past Wednesday we talked about the voice of the thunders, what the thunders uttered. The storm rolls over the water as lightning and thunder make their presence known. Have you ever been at sea during a storm? It's something else. Brother Terry was on ships in the back. When would that have been?
Back in the Cuban.
Back in the Cuban era.
Cuba was acting up, yeah.
So you've been at sea when the waves get choppy. I was on the nose of a typhoon in the Philippines, going between two islands in a double-hulled boat, and we had waves going over the cabin. It was exciting, and you get out there, and you understand a little bit of what David's talking about here. To see a storm on land is impressive. To see a storm at sea is really something. And David's kind of describing that here. This body of water that he's talking about here, taking it just very literally, is likely the Mediterranean, because David would have been in Bethlehem, which was down in the south, if he was when he was growing up as a shepherd, if he was king. The reason why we say it's the Mediterranean is because the storm is going to go next into Lebanon. So it would have had to travel a long way to get from the Sea of Galilee to Lebanon, or to get from the Dead Sea up to Lebanon. So verse 4, he says, the voice of the Lord is powerful, meaning there's strength, there's might, there's force. As he uses this voice of the Lord to describe this storm that comes in. The voice of the Lord is full of majesty or ornament, splendor, and glory. Have you ever sat and just watched a storm roll in? When you're not at risk of losing power and you're not watching your silo blow over? There is something beautiful about seeing a storm roll in. If you've ever been at sea, you know what that's like. If you've ever been in the air, if you've ever flown over a thunderstorm, that is also something to see. When you have lightning going just crazy under you, you see what he's talking about, what he was able to view from probably somewhere close to the coast as he's using this imagery. His awe of God's power is revealed here. Verse 5, the voice of the Lord breaketh the cedars. Yea, the Lord breaketh the cedars of Lebanon. He maketh them also to skip like a calf, Lebanon and Syrian, like a young unicorn. The storm rips apart the cedars of Lebanon. These were the best, the most sought-after trees in this part of the ancient world. If you remember, eventually, these would be used by Solomon. Solomon had great floats of the cedars of Lebanon brought down, and then they came in from the coast, and that's what the temple was constructed out of. All of the wood in the temple was used from the cedars. Also, his house was made of the cedars of Lebanon. These were very sought after. They were beautiful. They were massive. They were strong, and God breaks them. Like I can snap a pencil, God can much more easily snap the cedars of Lebanon. God's power is shown in his ability to bend these cedars. The bending we'll see in just a second. When he says Sirion, it's the Phoenician name for Mount Hermon, which is up towards the north part of Israel. And if you've ever seen a mountain in a storm, or even a hill in a storm, and you see the trees bend as the winds come, the mountain looks like it's moving a little bit. Or even if you see real tall grass, when the wind blows across it, it kind of looks like it's moving. That's kind of the picturing here.
I've heard stories about the people coming in from the coast, the East Coast, and they're get freaked out because of the grasses about that time were taller than horses. Then when the wind blew, it looked like waves.
Yeah.
I thought that was really impressive.
Yeah. Got big green waves in the west. Yeah.
I always thought that was awesome.
Yeah. And that's the idea here. The imagery is David is looking out on this mountain with all of these great big cedars that everybody wants. Some of them are breaking. Many of them are bending. And the hills look like they're alive as he's witnessed to the power of God sweeping in. He uses the word unicorn, that Lebanon and Sirion like a young unicorn. What exactly is he talking about here? My daughters are into unicorns, and they think of it as, typically a white horse with a horn coming out of its head.
My head, wild ox, right?
Wild ox is,
That's what mine
yeah,
said, too.
uni means one, and horn would also be the idea of a horn. And so he's talking about a single-horned critter of some sort. There are animals on earth right now who only have one horn. One of them is a narwhal, goes in, but it's a fish, so he's probably not talking about that on the hills. But there was a massive, now extinct bull called an auroch that perhaps they have discovered, and somehow they're trying to breed to get an auroch back. If you're interested, go home and Google. It's A-U-R-O-C-H. But they are some massive animals, and perhaps this would be one with one horn. Verse 7. The voice of the Lord divideth the flames of fire. What are divided flames of fire that you would see in a thunderstorm? Lightning. Yeah. The voice of the Lord divideth the flames of fire. The voice of the Lord shaketh the wilderness. The Lord shaketh the wilderness of Kadesh. The voice of the Lord maketh the hinds to calve, and discovereth the forest, and in his temple doth everyone speak of his glory. The flames of fire, bolts of lightning, the voice of the Lord shaking the wilderness. Well, you've got the lightning, and then you have the thunder coming in and rattling everything around. The storm moves south. As David says, it's now shaking the wilderness of Kadesh. Or perhaps he's alluding to the fact that though the storm is up in and around Lebanon, the thunder is loud enough that it must be moving things around down in Kadesh. So that's a wide expanse. Kadesh Barnea is the point in the south of Israel where the children of Israel, you remember the first time when they came under Moses and they sent in 12 spies into Canaan? That was from Kadesh. Okay, so it's the very extreme southern point, and David is talking about Lebanon, which is up on the northern border of Israel. The thunder is so intense that it discovereth the forests. To discover is to remove. So it strips the forest bare. It takes all of the leaves off the tree, blows all the pine needles off of these cedars. David then says that in his temple doth everyone speak of his glory. Now the temple didn't exist when David was alive. Not the temple that we refer to. Solomon, his son, built the temple. And if this was written when David was a shepherd, he didn't even know who Solomon was, perhaps, at this point. So he's obviously not talking about Solomon's temple. He's also likely not referring to the tabernacle, because he would have just called it the tabernacle. He's referring to nature itself, the temple of God, the place where the glory of God is very obvious to be seen. The heavens declare the glory of God. The firmament shows his handiwork. Following the storm, the power of God is visible in the birth of deer, the stripped and broken trees. When he said, did you see what he says? The voice of the Lord, again, using that as thunder, the storm, maketh the hinds to calve, makes the deer go ahead and it scares the deer into labor. So it makes the calves the deer to birth, strips and breaks the trees, the waves batter the seashores, and David got a front row seat to the whole show, got to watch it all. And in spite of all of that, verse 10, so the storm has passed. There's usually a calm that comes right before a storm, and then there's usually a calm that comes right after. And he says in verse 10, the Lord sitteth upon the flood, or the waters, the sea. Yea, the Lord sitteth king forever. The Lord will give strength unto his people. The Lord will bless his people with peace. While man is no match for the forces of God in nature, God is quite secure on his throne. Did the derecho that came through here in Iowa, did it budge God a little bit?
No.
Did he get worried at all?
No.
No, God wasn't worried. God is far above all of these things. The storm has done nothing to dislodge the omnipotent God. God sits above. God sits separate from. He has absolute and ultimate authority. Come what may. The very worst, the storm that came through here recently, there have been worse storms on earth, but they don't move God. When all has finished and the storm blows itself out, God gives strength and peace to his people. There in verse 11, the Lord will give strength unto his people. The Lord will bless his people with peace. Yes?
One of the things that we went up to see, in the park to Cedar Rapids. You can't get into all of Cedar Rapids. It was on the outer edges. And they had these big old trees, and it wasn't snapped off. They were pulled up, and you could see the roots.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I thought, that's the first time I've ever seen that.
Yeah.
Where these big old trees came up, roots and all.
I saw that too, yeah. Not just rip the tree right over.
Mm-hmm.
That would take a big machine, or it would take God. No, absolutely. His power wasn't diminished by doing that. It's amazing to think.
Yeah, it was fantastic. I
Yeah.
never seen where it just,
Yeah.
the roots and all was there.
The power of God is really something. When you can see all of this and you're up close to it. And we've had a front row seat to God's power and nature being revealed, even here in the past weeks. What has happened that we've gotten to see has been pretty amazing. The recent storm that hit us to the north, and sometimes storms come through here and they leave tornadoes in their wake, and they're testaments to the power of God. Say whatever you want about tornadoes. They are something that even the strongest man among us, and the man with the biggest military might at his disposal, he can go out and he can command a tornado, and it'll suck him up the same as it'll suck me up. It doesn't make any difference. Your strength, if you think you're powerful, go outside and try to command the weather, right? You'll find it really just doesn't work.
You can't even pay it off.
Right, can't pay it off, yeah, no amount of money. But the power and authority of God extends to the storms of life that we face as well, not just the physical storms. And all of us have storms that we face. In thinking of our nation right now, America is in the midst of some storms. We're getting beaten, and we have all of the forces of evil, truly, are being waged against truth. And it's a difficult time, but as David acknowledged, God is still on his throne. the riots in Minneapolis, or now in Kenosha, or the nonsense that goes on in Washington, or Kim Jong-un over there in North Korea and all of his babblings, and then you have what the mullahs are doing in Iran, all of them, put them all together, and it doesn't affect God at all. It doesn't rattle him. God never looks down. God doesn't watch Fox News. Okay?
No.
I know that doesn't come as a surprise to you, but sometimes it's good to be reminded of that God doesn't watch the news like we do. We watch the news. You ever turn on the news and you say, oh no. God never looks at what's going on and says, oh no. Because God knows exactly what's going on. And if God were to get tired of, let's use Kim Jong-un for an example. If God were to get tired of him, what would he have to do? He's gone. It's so much. It's so little effort that it doesn't even register for God to correct what we view as a massive problem. Harry Ironsides, a commentator of years gone by, said of this psalm, he said, it's a wonderful picture of the soul that's gone through its exercises, its stress, its trouble, but has learned that God is over all, that he's strong to save, and so the heart rests in him and is at peace. Whatever's going on in your life right now, and all of us have our troubles, and all of us know of issues, and if we were to sit here and we were to share all of the problems that we have or that we know about, we could depress all of us before we leave. But you know what? God's in control. And we can all, in just a few minutes, we're going to go to prayer. And I can take my prayer list, and I've got a whole lot. This is my second prayer list. I've got one blank on the back left. Okay? And I can take, God, all of these. Some of them are almost hopeless. And I can take, God, this prayer sheet, and it doesn't discourage him at all. It doesn't tax his power. God could heal everyone on this list. God could take everyone in this list home to be with him. It wouldn't require a great exertion on his part. The same God, the voice of God that's described to us by David, a man who knew what God's voice sounded like, uses this as an illustration. So praise God that his power far exceeds the calamities that surround us.